Hello, and welcome everybody to this presentation on the MA in Russian and Eurasian Studies as part of the MA Open Days here at Leiden University. My name is Isaac Scarborough. I'm Assistant Professor of Russian and Eurasian Studies in this program as well as some others, and I'm employed by the Institute of History at Leiden University. With me are Tim Sanders, who is the study coordinator for the MA in Russian and Eurasian Studies, and Emma Hublink, who is a current student on the program. Basically today I'm going to give you a short overview of the program, how it works, a few of the underlying ideas that we try to work with and grapple with in this program. And afterwards we're going to sort of open up the floor for discussion and any questions that you might have about how the program works, how it's structured, what is the content of the program. And I, Tim, and Emma will all try to answer those questions to the best of our abilities. But to start with, we do want to think a little bit about the region that we study in this program. So this is a regional studies program. It is a multidisciplinary study program. It is not specifically oriented around one or another discipline, but it combines many of them for the study of a larger region of the world. That region is Russia and Eurasia. A little bit later, I'll get into the complications about what is Eurasia, which is an interesting question too. But for the moment, we can think about Russia and Eurasia as, in many ways, the former Soviet space. The largest country within is, of course, Russia, but there are many other smaller countries. And this is a region of the world that very frequently is in the news. It's very frequently a topic of discussion. Most likely, many of you in your undergraduate studies in the last few years have discussed elements of this region, whether related to the war in Ukraine or otherwise. But it is also actually a highly understudied region. Very interestingly, although it is always seemingly topical, it is not always the #1 area of interest for many people in the world. So this is a sort of contradiction that always seems to stay with us, especially since the collapse of the USSR in 1991, in that this is an important region, it's a developing region, but one that you don't always see so much focus on as you might say on the Middle East or on East Asia and China or other parts of the world. It is, however, extremely important. We can see that it's extremely important because of current geopolitical events and processes, whether that's the war in Ukraine, other wars such as in Nagorno-Karabakh and the Caucasus, or the sort of reorientation of the global economy that we've seen since 2022. We have this idea of a new Cold War developing between the West and potentially Russia. There's a lot of barriers that are going up. At the same time, there are a lot of porous holes in these barriers, such as there were previously before 1991, and it's very fascinating in many ways to study how these barriers are going up and how in many ways they are still not as stringent as we might expect. There's a wonderfully long and complicated and troublesome history of the region. That history comes out in many of the events that we see today, but it is in and of itself a fascinating subject to study. So if you're interested in the history as well as geopolitics today, this is a region that has an enormous variety of peoples and cultures. It has an enormous variety of languages that are spoken, from Slavic languages to Germanic languages to Turkic languages. There's a huge, really expansive information about the world that you can get out of this region that you might not be able to get from many other regions of the world. So because of its geographic and historical expanse, it links to many other parts of the world, geographically, linguistically, and culturally, and really ties them together, I think, in a unique way. It's also increasingly a sphere that can provide value to individuals in their careers, and we'll come back to that later. But knowing Russian is not a bad skill to have at the moment, and the number of jobs that we do see asking for some reading knowledge or knowledge of Russian and other regional languages is increasing. So this is an interesting moment, especially I think geopolitically, historically, to study the region, to learn more about it, and to gain particular skills that may be valuable after your studies as well. Of course, Leiden is not the only place in the world that you could study Russia and Eurasia. We do think that we have a very unique and highly developed program. The Humanities faculty is in fact one of the highest rated in Europe. In general, it is an extremely well established and well-developed humanities faculty and program. There's a great amount of resources available to you at Leiden University in this MA and in others in the faculty. But this particular program is in many ways unique. The fact that it covers both Russia and Eurasia means that there is no other equivalent program in the Netherlands. There's no other program in the country that includes quite so many aspects of the former Soviet space and provides quite so many disparate geographic and cultural pieces to understand and to learn about the region. It is also, and I will emphasize this, a program that really wants to be as much about Eurasia as about Russia. And we have specialists that work on Central Asia, we have specialists that know about Belarus and Ukraine and countries outside of Russia. So our focus is not specifically Russia, but it is in fact the whole of the Eurasian space. And again, I'll come back to what that means in a minute. And I think this provides a great amount of opportunities to students in terms of what they want to study. So on this program, if you are interested in studying the Caucasus, whether it's history or the current events in the region or the languages, this is a possibility. If you're interested in studying Central Asia, it is also a possibility, as well as many different regions in Russia. It's also an extremely, I would say, individually tailored program because it is a relatively small department. There is a good, I think, student to teacher ratio. Classes are relatively small, and it gives you an opportunity as a student to really develop your own ideas about what you want to study. You'll have the opportunity to work closely with a supervisor, develop your thesis ideas and your research ideas, and throughout the program there's a lot of individual guidance and opportunities to develop research and your own conception of what that means for Russia and Eurasia and how your research fits into the study of Russia and Eurasia on your own. The classes are also quite international. We have students from around the world, from around Europe, from places outside of Europe, and this provides a very stimulating environment for class discussion, which adds, I think, a great deal to the student experience and also to the information available to you from your colleagues that you can apply in your research and in your studies as well. I should also mention that generally speaking, we expect people to speak and read Russian on a fairly competent level, it's sort of B1 officially, which means that the classes do involve reading in Russian. They do involve working with primary sources in Russian. It also means that we assume a baseline of knowledge about the region that allows students to discuss amongst themselves at a higher level and to have classroom discussions at a higher level because there is a certain amount of expertise, not only amongst the professors on the program, but amongst the students. And I think this is very much to the program's benefit because it allows us to sort of move beyond the details, say, of a particular conflict or move beyond the chronology of events that you might have dealt with in a BA program and to really get into a discussion of why things are happening or why historically there was a development. What events occurred before another? What is the chain of causality in a particular historical chain of events? And this requires students to come to the program with this background knowledge and the ability to read documents in Russian, but it really expands what it's possible to do on the program. We can talk a little bit about what the program looks like. You may have had an opportunity to look at the website of the program and to consider the courses that are available to you. Essentially, the program is built around a one-year course, but it is possible in some cases to extend if necessary. But the idea is that you are able to complete the course in the span of one calendar year. In the first semester, there are 2 core curriculum classes. This includes a research seminar where you develop in coordination with the program lecturers and your fellow students your ideas for what you want to study in your thesis. I'll come back to the thesis in a moment. And you have the opportunity to consider a variety of different disciplinary perspectives, to consider how people have studied Russia and Eurasia historically using historiography and historical perspective, how they have studied it using linguistic perspectives, political science perspectives. So a whole different number of social science and humanities disciplines are presented to you in this research seminar and gives you an opportunity to think about what you would like to apply, what methodologies, what disciplines you would like to apply in your own research. There's also a core class that we've introduced this year, which is called Eurasian Eurasianisms, Concepts and Contentions. And this is essentially a way to problematize for all of us what it is that we are studying. We say Russia and Eurasia, but we're not really sure what Eurasia is. We say Eurasianism as a sort of catch-all philosophy of the region, and there's a lot of controversy about whether or not we should this should be used, whether or not this is an appropriate term in the sense that it often comes from Russia. And so we want to really problematize some of these terms. We want to break them apart and understand where they're coming from. Are they politically motivated? What they have to say about the region? And in fact, I'll come back to that in a little bit after I discuss the content of the course. In addition to these two core courses, both of which are 5 ECs, which is to say a little less perhaps demanding in terms of reading and in terms of coursework, we also expect students to take 2 regular courses, right? So they can choose from a variety of different courses that are available to them. This year we're offering a course on post-Soviet violence, which is called Post-Soviet Wars, Economic Collapses and Their Violent Consequences. There's a class on Ukrainian politics, both domestic and foreign. There are classes both this semester and next semester on history. There are, and I'm going to mix here, but both in the first and second semester, there are these possible classes you can take. Some of them are, for example, on the Russian Revolution and reconsidering them. Some of them are on linguistics in the region. Some of them are on food in the region, which is also fascinating. So you can choose amongst the available courses on the program 2 in the first semester, and the expectation is that you choose 1 as well on the second semester. There's also the opportunity to take courses outside of the set program, so you can find electives, you can find courses that may be related to your study or interesting to the study and interesting to the research that you want to do, but which are not directly offered by our program. You can also find opportunities for internships, and we have many students who in the second semester will do an internship, which is also worth, I believe, 10 ECs. Tim can correct me. Okay, good. Also worth 10 ECs, so this covers the same that would be coming from an elective or a particular course that you would choose. But this is an opportunity to really apply your knowledge and also gain practical information and knowledge about the region. Some of the internships that we've had in recent years have been at embassies in Central Asia, as well as in think tanks and in businesses that operate in the region. So this is also really a good opportunity for students who have the time and the inclination to do some practical work alongside their study. And the final piece and the largest piece of the second semester and sort of individually largest piece of the program, of course, is the master's thesis. The master's thesis is the bulk of the academic work in the second semester, and it requires the student to design, implement, and write up an independent piece of research. As I mentioned before, the research seminar in the first term is in fact a sort of workshop for your ideas. So you are not starting from scratch in January in the second semester, you are starting from September in the very first semester, thinking about what you could study, thinking about what you can research, thinking about what materials and sources are available to you, how you can access them, and so forth. Those initial conversations and discussions lead into a literature review, which you will submit at the end of the first semester, and should hopefully by the beginning of the second semester structure what you want to write about in the region. You'll then work with a supervisor over the course of the second semester to put together these ideas into a concrete research plan and to conduct the research that is necessary. The thesis itself is expected to be a large piece of work. It's probably larger than you've written in your undergraduate program. It should require a fair amount of detailed research work with primary sources. It should apply sources as well that are in Russian or another regional language. So there are a fairly large number of somewhat stringent requirements for the thesis, but we find that it is all very much doable within this year. Some students do choose to extend further to do much more extensive research if they want. Maybe they had an internship in the second semester which didn't give them time to do the thesis, so they would push the thesis forward. But generally speaking, this is all plausible within the year. I should say, if you do have questions about the structure of the program, about the details of any of this, please do let our moderator know, and we can start discussing them after the presentation. But I did want to go back to this question of Eurasia and Eurasianisms, because again, one of the things that really sets our program apart is the inclusion of Eurasia. That is not simply a Russian studies program, it's not a Russian literature program, it's not a Russian language program, it's a program about the entirety of the region. And in fact, here terminology is very problematic because We used to have the USSR, and even then the USSR was not all-inclusive of everything that could have been Eurasia. And the studies of Eurasia during the Soviet period also suggested that, in fact, by restricting ourselves to the Soviet Union, we overlooked pieces of the world, say Mongolia or part of Iran or other parts of the world around the USSR that ought to be included historically, culturally, geographically in this. But we had the USSR, we thought of the Soviet world, right? And we focused on that. The USSR collapses, and again this question comes up. What is it that we are studying? What is this region that we have in front of us? Is it simply all the countries that used to be part of the USSR? Is it some of the countries that used to be part of the USSR? If so, which countries? Should we include the Baltic states? Should we not include the Baltic states? Should we include Moldova? Should we not? Why? These are the same questions that we hear very frequently today geopolitically, in the sense of where does Ukraine fit into this picture? Is Ukraine part of Eurasia? Should it be understood as Eurasia? Should it be understood as Europe? There are many different views on this. Does it need to be exclusive? Quite possibly a country could be part of Europe and part of Eurasia. Eurasia as a geographic sense applies to the entirety of Europe and Asia together. So on a very basic level, all of these debates seem to be a little bit over-politicized. They're about politics. And yet they also really matter to many people in the region, and they really matter to many of the states and the societies and the individuals who make up this region. And we, in the program, try to break this apart. We try to understand what it is that is Eurasia. For practical terms, essentially, when we say Russia and Eurasia, I will say that we tend to mean most of the former Soviet space. And most students on the program study one or another society or culture or people or state in the former Soviet space. Generally, we don't see a lot of study on the program on the Baltics, but it could be included. There's in fact no reason why it couldn't. So there's a lot of variation that's possible, but what we do in fact in the core course in the first semester is give students an opportunity to think for themselves. What is Eurasia? We're not giving an answer necessarily, but we're asking this question. And it is quite possible for the student individually to say, well, this is how I am defining Eurasia, and this is how I intend to apply it in my own research. But it also opens up the possibility to really try to interrogate why it is that we are so interested in this region, what it is about the region that draws interest politically at the particular moment, historically why it's been of particular interest. And we work with people who are politicians and their ideas. We work with historians and theoreticians and their ideas. And we try to really pull apart what it is that has made this concept of Eurasia both very interesting and very controversial. So I've just put up two quotes here that you can take a look at. One is from a man named Lev Gumilyov, who was a historian and a theoretician in a way of the Russian people and of Russian history, who wants to say something about where Eurasia comes from and what Russia has to do with this. And also a fairly old quote from Vladimir Putin, the president of Russia, where he suggests that Russia has always felt herself to be a Eurasian country. Never have we forgotten that the greatest part of Russian territory is in Asia. The longer quote by Gumilyov I'm not going to read, but Gumilyov also wants to suggest that there is something particular about Russia that is different from Europe, but he also wants to say that it's different from Asia. So there are a great deal of variations here. A politician may want to emphasize that Russia is not part of Europe, that it's part of Asia. A historian may want to emphasize that it is something unique, that it lays in the middle. Students themselves may have a different view. There's a very long debate, in fact, in Russia itself about where Russia and the Russian Empire and the Soviet Union land. Are they part of Europe? Are they part of Asia? Are they something uniquely situated in the absolute middle of the entire continent? Somehow neither one nor the other, but including both. And this is what we talk about in this class, and we talk about how it is possible to research the region, how it's possible to research Russia and Eurasia, especially in the particularly controversial moment that we live today, in a way that you do not, say, end up in the same position as a politician who you don't want to be in the same position as, so that you're not necessarily just repeating what a particular state is saying about the region, or that you are able to differentiate your position and say, this is your Eurasia, this is what we are going to say about it. And this is, I have to repeat again, it's an absolutely fascinating moment to be studying the region. In many ways, it's extremely problematic, it's troublesome, it's a horrifying moment because of what is happening in Ukraine. But it is also a moment of renegotiation. It's a moment of reconsideration of boundaries, and academically, it's an opportunity, I think, as a student to really add your own voice, to think about what it means to you as a student and what you can add to this ongoing geopolitical debate. You're also thinking, though, of course, not only about the research that you would do on this program, but what you would do after the program. Some of you might be academically or particularly academically inclined. You might be thinking about academia as a career. And we do have students that continue after this MA in PhD programs. You'll see there's a list of people, particular jobs that people have had after this program. It includes in Princeton University, but many students also go on to study at Leiden University, at Dutch universities, at international universities. So there is the opportunity, of course, to use your study and the particular research that you would do on this program as a sort of springboard to think about academic research as a career, or academic research as something you would continue to want to pursue. But this is not the only opportunity, I think, that opens up after an MA in Russian Eurasian Studies by any means, and it's not one that we necessarily assume that everyone is interested in. There are a great number of other opportunities. We have many students that go into work for government, whether in the Dutch government or another government. Students go to work for foreign embassies for their respective states. In the past year, I know at least 2 or 3 who are being, or sort of in the process of becoming diplomats. They may go to work for think tanks or research organizations, NGOs, development agencies as well. So that we do see a lot of placement in the public sector in various ways. But there are also opportunities, I think, increasingly so, I think, in business and in finance. There are sort of arms of finance institutions that have to do with strategic investments, and you see a lot of people there may have a background in the region or language knowledge or the capacity to research these lesser known parts of the world that is very valuable to financial institutions and banks. You see this in some large scale corporations as well. So the knowledge that you would gain on this program, and I think also, it should be emphasized, the ability to research independently a lesser known part of the world and to seek out knowledge about something that isn't always so easily available will serve you very well. Whether you go to work for a government, whether you go to work for a development agency or a bank or a corporation, these are very transferable skills. And I think especially if you're studying something that is a bit niche, that is a bit unusual, that requires a bit more work for you to really find information about, which is the case with Russia and Eurasia, we're not going to lie, that is a great skill, right? That ability to independently say, okay, I know what I need to seek out and I'm going to seek it out, and I may or may not have a good direction given to me to do it, that is an absolutely transferable skill to basically any job that you probably would be looking for after an MA. And I'd really emphasize that these are the skills that you should think about when you're looking for a potential employment after your MA, and it's also something you can really develop on this program. So this is essentially the end of the formal talk that I have for you. If you'd like to find out more information, of course, we're here. We're going to answer any questions that you had. We'd very much like to have a discussion about all of this. Please do ask questions. But if you'd like to look more online, this is the website of the program. You can find a great deal of information there. There's a Facebook group, which has information as well. And the email for Tim Sanders here, the study coordinator, is also on screen. So if you have very particular individual questions that you did not want to discuss in this format, you can also email Tim to get an answer as well. Thank you very much. So we have a question from Safia. She asks, hello, I'm interested in the program, but I'm afraid whether it is too theoretical. Can someone find a practical job? Or is it more academic? I think we partly covered this. Did you want to add anything, Tim? Or?
No, maybe just to repeat that, well, yes, it is an academic program, so it is theoretical in a way. But from the list of jobs that our students go into, I think you can see that it has very sort of practical usage in that sense. So I think the program is fairly theoretical, but it has sort of practical sort of output afterwards.
Okay. Do you want to add anything about jobs? Or?
Yeah, if you want to put your knowledge into practice, for example, halfway through the MA, you can decide to do an internship as well.
Yeah, definitely.
But furthermore, I would also say it's highly theoretical. Yeah, the program itself, yeah.
Yeah, no. I mean, it's fair, right? It does, it is an academic research program, yeah. So this is the expectation. But the question is then what you can do afterwards. But internship is a good point, right? Mm-hmm. So automatically, even within the program, there is some ability to apply it. Yeah. Okay. Francesca says, if my country does not offer CEFR testing, can I prove my level of Russian with another certificate? My understanding is yes, but...
Yeah, because this proves difficult sometimes for students to show their level of Russian. We are sort of flexible when it comes to showing that you have the required level of Russian, and the basic idea there being just make sure that you're up to speed with your Russian and that you can especially read Russian, so that you have access to the sources that you need in order to be able to comfortably study in the program.
I think also my understanding is if it somehow is impossible to acquire some sort of certification, you can come and Leiden will provide a sort of baseline test as well, right, to determine. Is that correct?
Yeah, or we ask you to sort of either provide any type of proof is mostly good enough, so to speak. Yeah,
it's a fairly flexible.
Yeah.
Okay. So Jessica asks a somewhat similar question, but on the other side of things, I have the language requirement, but only a degree in humanities. Would I need to do the pre-master? I don't think so.
Potentially.
No? Okay.
Yeah. It really depends. Of course, the language requirement is important, but you need, like you also mentioned during the presentation, some basic knowledge about the region, so that we can, in the program, really lift that discussion to a higher level. The admission board looks at all applications individually. So my advice would always be apply, so that we can look at your complete file and see whether you're eligible for admission, yes or no, and or whether there are possibilities for a pre-master.
Okay. Actually,
I did the pre-masters, Jessica, last year. So if you have any questions, don't hesitate to contact me through LinkedIn or something like that. Emma Hoblink. Yeah, I can help you if you have any questions about the pre-masters.
I mean, Emma, what did you find the pre-masters? So you came in with a degree in humanities as well, is that correct?
Yes, I did European studies before.
Okay.
Yeah. The pre-masters, actually I ended up being the only student in the pre-masters, but I just followed some courses with the bachelor students, and I felt very much included in the Russian studies environment. I also got a lot of guidance on a personal level. I had to write a BA thesis as well, and time actually flew by, and I also had this tailor-made program. So in the end, I think I only did 35 ECs because a lot of things I had already covered in my bachelor. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think the key to the pre-masters is that it is the sort of individually developed program, an individually tailored program. So, I think, as Tim said, the idea is then you want to make sure that all students have a level of both language and regional knowledge before they start the program. So you kind of see where there are gaps, if there are, and then try to fill those in the course of the year. Okay, but we have a question from Zumaira. She says, hello and good day. I'm interested in the program. I have my eye on Old Church Slavic language and culture. What exactly do we learn on this course? Do we have the possibility to access the manuscript? Although I don't teach this course, so I should say that I don't have as much detail as the course convener would have. The basic idea is actually an overview of the language, and I think a basic introduction to the language. So you will learn Staroslaviansky, right, the Old Church Slavonic language, on a very basic level. I think the idea is to try to give the ability to students to start reading. Assuming that the students have Russian knowledge, then they can transfer that to Old Church Slavonic, and they can start to understand how to read it. And ideally, of course, you would learn the skills that would allow you to access manuscripts and to use them for your research. So there are professors on the course who are great experts in this field and have the opportunity to really help students develop their research skills. So I think if that is something that you want to pursue, yes, absolutely, that's a possibility. Anything? No. Okay. No. I haven't taken this course, so I don't know. But the people who work on Old Church Slavonic really, I think, are world-leading experts at Leiden. So they're amongst the best people to work with. Simone asks, could you dive more into the details of the prospect of working for NGOs in the development area in general? Well, I think the details of the prospect, yes. What we're talking about here is, if you are interested, for example, for working for the UN or say IOM or ILO, these sort of larger development agencies, a lot of the starting jobs are in sort of non-Western nations. Right? There are jobs that expect you to go and work. There are entry-level jobs, in Geneva. And I think there's a lot of demand for those things. But it is also always a possibility to go and, say, work in a place like Tajikistan or Kazakhstan. And there are a great number of development agencies, say, in Central Asia and in the Caucasus. And I think what gives a real boost if you are interested in these jobs, smaller development agencies as well, I've just mentioned some very large ones, but is that if you actually know the language where you're going, or at least know Russian so you can get around in the region, and if you have some background knowledge and understanding of the region. Right? From my own experience, I know that a great number of development workers, as well-meaning as they are, don't necessarily know very much about the context in which they are working, and their work suffers as a result. But the people who come in with background in the region, who've done a master's, who had some research experience learning about the region before going to work, I think that their ability to do their jobs is much higher and to a significant level. And I think this is where you can make a pitch, right? If you are interested in these development jobs, if you want to go and work for a development agency abroad, you can say, look, I have the knowledge of the region, I have the language ability in the region, I can communicate and I can do the job better than people without those particular skills could do. Should we move on? Or do you...
Yeah.
Okay. But if you guys want to say anything, you should jump in. I keep talking.
No, you're doing great.
Okay. Roberto Andre asks, is it possible to do an internship at the Dutch embassies in Eurasia if I'm not a Dutch citizen? I think no.
I don't think so.
You will want to look at the embassies of the nation of which you are a citizen, generally is the rule. Yeah. I think it's very hard to be employed by an official state agency if you're not a citizen. I haven't heard of any examples.
No, nor have I.
Francesca asks, what are the modalities of the classes? I'm not sure I know what modalities means here. Do you guys understand?
No, I'm afraid not.
Is this what kind of academic resource? Or I
maybe structure? I mean, if the question is about structure, then maybe... I mean, more or less, classes are seminar-based, so they're discussion, there's not a lot of lecture, right? I mean, we assume, again, that students have background knowledge about the region, that they're able to do the readings for the class, whether it's in Russian or in English or Dutch or any language that they want. So you don't necessarily need to give knowledge to students, right? That's not how we approach the program. So the idea is then that we are going to discuss, we're going to argue, we're going to trade opinions. If that's not what you mean by modalities, Francesca, I apologize. But
I think it's good. Maybe you would like to say something about one of the classes that you're currently taking and how that is for you, what your personal experiences in class. Just pick one.
Yes, of course. Yeah. Well, at the moment, all my classes, or two of the courses, so besides the research seminar, are seminar based. So we are actually always discussing. Of course, there's the lecturer who provides the information that we maybe miss or that we are talking about, but I actually find it super inspiring and interesting to learn from my peers as well. I also see that in the seminar. So, for example, right now I'm doing the Ukrainian politics and international relations course, which is, of course, super interesting because it provides the context and historical background for, well, the current conflict, but more than that. It also proves that it has always been very important and maybe understudied. And so also my fellow students, some of them are from the former Soviet Union, for example. So it's very, very interesting to talk to them. And it's always really interactive. So with the professor, lecturer, and my fellow students. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, and there is a great deal to learn from your colleagues. I think this
Definitely.
is also one of the advantages to again having this sort of well knowledgeable and experienced body of students, right? So that everybody has things to add. I think in the current group there are people who already have worked, say, for development agencies, right? Yeah. And can talk about what that's like, and also from the region and have lived there or worked there and so forth. So it's really a good mix. But Bart asks, does the program help you find internships in the region? Is there any chance internships will be possible in Russia? Those are two different questions. But does the program help you find internships? Yes, on an individual basis, we can provide guidance. We can provide recommendations of who to talk to. But this is sort of an individual basis. So, if you are interested in an internship and you're having trouble finding something, you'd want to talk to Tim or myself or another lecturer on the program, and we may be able to advise whom to speak with.
Yeah. Good. I think what you say is we provide guidance. We don't have a list of internships
Yeah,
that you
yeah,
can
yeah.
pick from, but depending on your interest and where you want to go, we might be able to point in the right direction and help you to find an internship that suits your personal needs.
Yeah. In the current situation, there are basically we cannot, I think, certify any internships in Russia. There would have to be a very significant change politically, which I find unlikely to be the case in the next 12 to 24 months. But everything is unpredictable. So yeah, in the current moment, no. But
In general sense, basically the university follows travel advice from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. So if that's negative advice, then students can't go to that particular country, be that Russia or any of the other countries.
Yeah. I think at the moment this also excludes Ukraine because of sort of safety issues. That might change. I mean, I could see Ukraine potentially, again, geopolitics is unpredictable, but I would say more likely, say in 12 to 24 months, there would be a change in relation to Ukraine than Russia. I mean, hopefully. Funding options for the MA, Francesca asks, I don't know, Tim?
There are some options for scholarships and so on, but not many. Most students will have to pay tuition fees themselves.
Yeah, it may be possible to find outside funding, I think.
Yeah.
If you're looking, outside of Leiden University and outside of the scholarships available in Leiden, I assume there's no issue there. But through the program, it's quite limited, unfortunately. Is it manageable to combine this MA program with another master's?
Well,
Theoretically?
yes. Well, not if you want to stick to the 1 year. We do have students that take on 2 masters, but that then usually takes them 2 years. And there is there might be a benefit from sort of combining masters.
It also depends on which program, because you have to negotiate with both programs, so both with ours and with the second program. And I know some students have had the idea that, okay, I'll do 2 programs but write 1 thesis. And this only works if the topic of the thesis and the research of the thesis fits all of the requirements for both programs. Yeah. And some programs will actually require then the thesis to be longer. So you won't be asked, right, our thesis is 20,000 words. Yep. Other programs may be longer, but even if theirs is 20 and ours is 20, if it's a combined, they may ask you to do 30, right? Or they may 40. Right? 40. Right, so you might not have less work. In fact, you might just double your workload, which is why, as Tim says, it's going to take more than a year. Yep. I don't know of anybody who did a dual in a year.
No.
I mean, the world is full of possibility, but I don't think that really is.
No, but there are students that do 2 master programs, but then usually it takes them about 2 years or so to complete both.
Okay. Jessica asks, what do you guys find the most exciting, enlightening part of the degree or field? I think that's probably to Emma.
Yeah. That's a very nice question. Well, that's difficult to pick, but to give a concrete example, so in the pre-masters I did in the previous year, I wrote my thesis on, I did a case study on Nagorno-Karabakh, and when I started, or when I picked this topic, it wasn't actually this heated, the conflict, and now we see, so I dove into, I learned a lot about it, and now we see that it's actually very active again, and that makes it super fascinating that you are studying something that's so relevant and maybe understudied before, but it continues there. As I mentioned before, I also just love learning from my fellow students, and I think the Eurasian part of the program is, at first maybe I would say it was a bit mysterious to me, but now I actually see it makes so much sense, and I'm super glad that we get so much expertise from our lecturers. So it's endlessly fascinating. Yes.
Thank you. Sarah asks, what kind of topics do students write their theses about? It's a very good question. Essentially, a huge variety of topics, so it's hard to sort of categorize. The program, in some ways, can be divided into a sort of politics, history, and economics block, as well as a more linguistics and literature block. So you could divide more or less the research that students choose to do into either about language and linguistics, or about history and politics and economics in some ways. So you'd have that division. If you're working on linguistics, there have been recent theses about I think Georgian language. We had a couple in the last couple of years. We also had Old Church Slavonic, which was mentioned. Different aspects of historical linguistics, also current socio-cultural linguistics, how language is being used in the current moment in Russia or Eurasia. If you're looking at history and politics and economics, there's an enormous spectrum. There are currently theses being written about political discourse in Ukraine, about the role of the Ukrainian war on Moldovan, Prednistrian, sort of Transnistrian relations, on the development of Central Asian security apparatuses after 1991. So we do see a fair amount of sort of current politically oriented theses from this area studies perspective. We also see historically oriented ones, as well as ones dealing with economics a little more directly. So it's really, there is no restriction essentially, right? Because it's an area studies program, it doesn't require students to focus on one or another discipline, or to really, limit themselves in that way, but to consider what it is that they feel needs to be studied, what they have the capacity to study, what they're interested in, what sources they can find, and then choose the disciplinary tools available to them to really pick it apart. Okay.
Good. Well,
good.
Thank you all. Thank you, Isaac, for
thank you, Tim and Emma,
the core of our presentation. Thank you, Emma.
Appreciate it very much. Thank you all of you in the audience for your questions and your attention. Again, if you do have questions, please do email Tim, who is able to answer, I think, a great deal of detail about the program, how it works, how you can apply, how the situation is in general in Leiden. If you want to reach me, of course, you're more than welcome to email me. My email is available on the Leiden University website. And we'll look forward to seeing many of you next year.
Thank you.
Thanks.